And we are live. What's going on YouTube Live? It's your boy Billy Rowe. Today is Wednesday. I'd like to welcome you to the first row. And if it is Wednesday, you should already know what that means. It's time for the Wednesday word. That's Wednesday word. Jumping straight into it. Tonight's topic is fall or fly. As always, I like to explain what I mean by my topics, fall or fly, or by all my topics, but by the topic tonight's topic, fall or fly. What I mean by tonight's topic is not being afraid to take the actions necessary to achieve your dreams. Be willing to fail or exceed your imagination. You never know what's going to happen, but if you take no action, you're going to find out that that fear of falling, or even sometimes that fear of flight, may hold you back from achieving your dreams. So that's what I mean by tonight's topic. Tonight, I got 3 tools for you for the first row that I want to share with you. Tools that I kind of came up with that I felt were the top tools that I came up with in addressing this particular topic. Hopefully you enjoy them. Let's jump straight into it. So the very first tool that I came up with when it came to fall or fly, or when it comes to fall or fly, is leap. Now, I use leap because when I think of fall or flying, for myself personally, I think about, being at the edge of a cliff and having to make a decision on whether I'm going to fall or take flight. Maybe, maybe not even at the edge, but having to run at a cliff and maybe jump off to take that flight. And so the reason why I say leap is because it's an action word, but it's also a word that requires, some sort of sacrifice, because logically we typically don't jump off of cliffs. We don't typically run and jump off of them. We don't run to them to jump off of them. And even if we're not running and we're at the edge, we don't just typically jump off of them. So the leap, the thing about leaping is what I started to really reflect about was being a child. And, when you're a child, everything is so huge and humongous, so that it's so big that, like, if I jump off this rock, it's like I jumped off a 5-story building. And if I, ran up this slide and jumped off the side of it, then it's like jumping off a 10-story building. And so what it got me to thinking is that the action or the thought that comes before the action of leaping really is understanding your perspective. So going back to the playground when I was a kid, we used to play tag all the time. And I was known for just not wanting to be it. There's plenty of people who probably testify to that, me not wanting to be it, because I would jump off of anything to not be it in tag. And so when I would jump off of things like the playground, let's say I'm jumping off the bridge of the playground, though my eyes are at one level, my feet are at another level. And we all know, unless you jump head first, the first thing that's going to hit is your feet. And so it got me to thinking about, like, how big we think jumps are, or how big we may think a fall may be. And because how big we think it is, we don't leap. But the reality is that if now I'm 5'8". So I'm 5'8". If I want to jump off of something now, and I'm going to land feet first, not only am I going to probably regret it because of my knees, but not only am I going to perceive the jump to be higher than it is, I'm really probably adding 5.5 feet of distance that I think I actually have to cover when my feet actually will hit the ground first. So if I'm jumping off of a 5-foot jump, just my height alone makes that a 10-foot jump, which can, if you have a fear of heights, or if you're concerned about getting hurt, injured, that can spark up additional fear in you and keep you from leaping. And a lot of times that's what keeps us from taking action. What's what keeps us from leaping when it comes to having those moments in our life, or attaining those dreams in our lives that we're going to have to risk falling or flying in, is that we are looking at a perspective. Now, the perspective is not a height perspective. Metaphorically, it's a height perspective. However, it's not physically a height perspective. What it is, it's an unknown perspective, because we really don't know, when we're pursuing our dreams, how far we have to go. If the dream's around the corner, or if the dream is around the block, or if the dream is across the world, we don't know those measurements. So any leap that we take comes with a fear of unknown because of the perspective that we're in. However, just like that fear that may be added based on the perspective of our eyes, once you have an understanding that, hey, my eyes aren't the first thing that's going to hit the ground, this jump is actually about a 5-foot jump, and I'll be able to land to the ground safely and uninjured. Once you have that, you're able to understand, hey, I can make these jumps and not be hurt. The thing is that from the mental perspective, once you leap and you start doing the actions necessary to obtain your dreams, then you start being able to better judge and gauge what the distance is between your present position and the dream that you're pursuing. And so one thing I really want you to take away from this particular tool, the tool of leaping when it comes to fall or fly, is you have to, I really got to get out of that. I try to stay out of that habit of saying you have to. My recommendation is that your desire to succeed is always greater than your fear of failure, because really that's what we look at falling and flying is. If my anticipation or my goal is to get into the air and I fall, then that is a failure on obtaining my goal of getting into the air. However, if I continue to try, continue to push, continue to revamp, and I get into the air, then that is a success. So your desire to get in the air and take flight has to be stronger than your fear of falling or making mistakes and not hitting it on the first shot. So that's tool number one, is leap. Be willing to leap. Tool number two when it comes to fall or fly is something that I learned, and I'll share in the story later on this particular segment. But something that I learned is that sometimes it's not about having all the new bells and the new whistles and the new tools and the new gadgets. Sometimes you have to learn to use the resources that you have at hand. Hey, what's going on, Brother Bruce? And that's what the second tool is it's really learning to use the resources that you have in hand. And the reason I think this tool was so important to me is because when it comes to the concept of fall or fly, I think a lot of us fail to even attempt to fly because we're so busy building contingency plans for the fall. So we got an airbag at the bottom. We got, a safety net. We have a fire fighting unit. We have a parachute on our back. We have all these things as contingency plans, yet we have yet to leave the ground in order to attempt to fly and soar towards our dreams. So using the resources at hand, what it does is it causes you to say, okay, do I have a parachute? No problem. This is what I'm going to use instead of. You start becoming very resourceful with what you have. This is something that I also learned when I was unemployed. I forget what year. I think it was 2009 when I was unemployed. I learned the importance of being resourceful. So because I'm unemployed and I'm only getting like $400 every 2 weeks, I got to really stretch my money. And I remember the vacuum cleaner broke down and it was like, okay, well, we got to vacuum our floor because what we're not going to do is not vacuum the floor until I get a job. That's not an option. So we got to vacuum the floor. So I can find a belt for this vacuum cleaner and try to fix this vacuum cleaner. And that's what I did. I fixed it myself. A couple YouTube videos, a couple other things, a couple searches, and boom, vacuum cleaner was fixed, back up and running. And that's using the resources at hand. Now, when it comes to our dreams, using our resources at hand, sometimes, you may not have the technology. Guess what? There's still this old-fashioned device called paper, pencil. I got pens and highlighters over here. This old-fashioned tool called paper and pen. And so instead of trying to, I got to get the newest and the latest, greatest thing, I got to get the voice recorder, or I got to get the voice, I think is Dragon technology to talk to type. I got to get all these different things. Sometimes it's a matter of just saying, I got a couple pieces of paper. And guess what? If you don't got a couple pieces of paper and you get bills, you might have a couple pieces of blank sides of paper on the other side of those bills. Put those bills to work for you since you're going to pay them anyway. So that's the second tool, is really using the resources at hand. And the last thing about using resources at hand is that if you use the resources at hand, you are typically going to innovate along the way. So the thing that really stuck out to me about this, in the things that I've experienced recently, were Tesla's reusable rockets, or I'm sorry, not Tesla's, SpaceX's reusable rockets. Imagine I think it happened in 2018. In 2018, these rockets were shot off. They came back down and they landed. It was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Like, I felt my heart racing. Maybe that's the nerd in me, but y'all gonna have to live with that. But these rockets literally went up to space, came back down, and landed upright. Something like out of a sci-fi movie. I almost felt like maybe Hollywood's trying to get over on us. However, imagine if we waited to try to do space exploration until these rockets were reusable. We would just be starting to explore space a year ago. And how much would we have not discovered? How much would we be behind? Not even just as a country, I mean, like as a world, how much would we be behind without being able to explore space and understand that there are boundaries that we had yet to push. So that's what it's about using the resources at hand. Be resourceful with what you have. And then eventually you may get to a point where you have other things that you can rely on or use. So that's tool number 2. The third and the final tool, it kind of ties into what I was just talking about, is learn efficiency along the way. Kind of scary thing when it comes to flight. Like, okay, so we're going to get in the air and then we're going to learn efficiency along the way. Like, but we're already in the air, so we need to kind of know what we want to do. I get that, but just because you take off, it doesn't mean that there's no chance that you might fall. It doesn't mean that you are 100% competent with flight. So learn efficiency along the way. And I think the best way for me to highlight that is, when a pilot is learning how to fly a plane, they do a lot of simulation, a whole lot of simulation before they actually go up in a plane and start, flying around with the controls. They do this also with astronauts. And so in the simulation environment, there are certain risks you can take. There's certain things you can do that will show you, hey, in the laws of physics, that doesn't work and you just crash the plane. That's a great learning platform. But now once you're in the air, you'll start finding out there are certain things you can do. Autopilot was an efficiency when it came to flying commercial airplanes or for flying, commercially flying airplanes. It was like, okay, so if instead of having somebody who is constantly making these tweaks and adjustments to the plane manually, it was like, we could probably put some algorithms into this computer and have the computer make these minor tweaks and adjustments, allow the pilots to be a little more rested and alert when it comes time for them to take over the plane and land it. So those are the efficiencies that were learned along the way in flying. Now, the other aspect of learning efficiencies along the way is sometimes you'll find that you have to revamp in the middle of your flight. Sometimes you'll have to revamp in the process of journeying to your dream. And it is okay that you have to revamp in that process. But if you're so complacent because now I'm in the air and I'm moving towards my dream, I can only move in this set pattern and these set steps in this set manner. If that's where your mind takes you to, or if that's where your perspective takes you to, then what ends up happening is now in order to actually make a change or make an adjustment, you have to land in order to make the adjustment. So if you don't go off with enough fuel, it's one thing to not leave with enough fuel and say, hey, I got to land to refuel because I don't have enough fuel for this flight. But it's a completely different thing to say, hey, you know what? I don't know if I packed my toothbrush, so I'm going to land this plane and go and buy a toothbrush, and then we're going to take back off again. Everybody knows the most fuel for a flight is used between takeoff and landing. And I believe takeoff is even more because you're trying to get the inertia to get into the air, and landing is a little bit of help with gravity landing the plane. So those are the 3 tools that I have for you today. Again, really quick to go over them. The tools for fall or fly, and when it comes to your dreams, is number 1 is leap. You got to be willing to take that action. Understand that your perspective of the unknown is simply because it's unknown. Move into the unknown and it begins to become known, and it becomes more comfortable and easier for you to overcome that fear of falling, and it's easier for you to fly as a result. The second tool being use the resources at hand. You don't need all the bells and whistles. You don't need all the latest, greatest, newest, brightest, shiniest things. Be willing to use the resources that you have at hand, and don't spend all those resources that you have at hand making contingency plans for the fall. Because what happens if you happen to fly on your first attempt? Now you got all this stuff down here on the bottom that you've wasted time and energy and money acquiring or even repurposing in order to move towards your dream. And then the third and the final thing is learn efficiency along the way. It's a journey. And so, you may only have the ability to pack so much water. You'll have to figure out how to become efficient at finding water along the way. You may only have packed so many relationships on the journey to your dreams. You might have to become efficient and learn efficiencies of making strong, deep connections along the way. and maybe it'll happen in a much more expedited process than the process of, oh, I met you in elementary school and we went to junior high school and we went to high school and we went to college and now our families are family friends. No. You might have to learn efficiencies along the way and figure out how to make those deep, meaningful, lasting relationships along the way. So those are the 3 tools. I hope you have enjoyed them. As I said earlier, as always with the Wednesday Word, I like to share a personal story, something that kind of got me thinking about this particular topic. And so when it comes to the fall or fly, in regards to trying to obtain your dreams, one of the things that it reminded me of was my move back to my house. I'm sorry, correct that. My move back to my mother's house in my early 30s. Yeah, early 30s, because it was 5 years ago and I'm past 35. Boom. In my early 30s, I moved back to my mother's house. And one of the biggest things for me was, I was like, yeah, I don't really want to be a boomerang child, like coming back to live with my mom. Even though I knew I was in a transition period and I was just simply, I mean, my family had moved down to Southern California. The plan was for us to all move down to Southern California. And so because I took a new position, I needed to stay up for some training. I stayed up for the training, and then it turned out my family moved back from Southern California, and we were all in my mom's house. And that can be kind of deflating to be like, wow, you know, I'm a grown man. I got a family of 4, and we are all living in my mother's house. Can be kind of deflating to a person like myself who is an independent mind, independent thinker, wants to provide for himself, wants to provide for his family. But what I did is I had to leap, and I had to realize in my leap, in the leap of we were going to move to Southern California, there was a fall taking place. And instead of waiting until I hit the ground, and instead of waiting until we hit the ground as a family, we started figuring out efficiencies in the midst of falling. And figuring out those efficiencies were, okay, it's going to cost too much for us to pay for a house in Sacramento and pay for a house in Southern California. So we'll get rid of the house in Sacramento. You'll move down to Southern California. I'll move in with my mom. And then the ego slap when you find you're moving into you're back into your mother's house and you're staying in your childhood room. Like, this is the room that I was in for elementary school, junior high, high school. Had a phone on the wall that was my phone I shared with my sister. Like, it's definitely a step back for the ego. However, what I learned is how to be resourceful, or how to be efficient with my resources and use the existing resources that I had. So instead of every night, oh, well, since I'm living at my mom's house and I have more disposable income because I'm not paying what I was paying for all the stuff when I was living on my own, I didn't just eat out every night and eat good meals and go out and have just a good time with my buddies. I started becoming actually a lot more fiducially responsible with the money that I did have. And then when my family came back, that's when I learned how to be efficient along the way. And when I say along the way, that was along the fall. It wasn't along the flight. It was along the fall that we learned to be more efficient along the way. Because when my family came back, I remember specifically asking, hey, do we want to rent a place to live, or do we want to buy our own home? And so in the conversation that we had, it was, we want to buy a home. All right, so there's some things I got to do. I'm going to have to work 2 jobs to be able to pay off a couple of pieces of our debt, put us in a position financially to have the money to put down on a home and all these other different things. And so what do? I work 2 jobs. Now, working 2 jobs, if you've ever done that, when you work a full-time job and a part-time job, it's exhausting. And I knew that though that might take me out of free fall and move me into a controlled fall, because it didn't move me into flight, it was still going to slow the process of falling for me to figure out how I was going to get some lift in the midst of this fall. And so what I did is I worked the 2 jobs until we got to the place where we were able to afford to put it down on a home. And so then we go to put the down on the home. And the first thing, once we get into the home, is now I have to learn the efficiency, because we're flying towards the goal of home ownership. We get to the goal, but that didn't mean the flight came to an end. It's almost like now you got to land the plane. I knew that I didn't want to work 2 jobs all the time. So now I have to figure out what is the landing for this particular dream, for this particular goal. And the landing was getting myself to a position where I no longer needed 2 jobs. And it took a while. It actually took, 1, 2, 3, I think 3 years or so before I mean, and that's from the beginning before we got the home till the end when we were in the home. But it took about 3 years to get to the place where I didn't need two jobs. I wasn't working a side hustle with Lyft and all those other things, and to where I could actually work one job. And all that was it was teaching me that, hey, there's going to be goals out there that are going to stretch you. They're going to make you feel like you're in free fall the moment you run off the cliff. And it's okay that you feel that way. It's called fall or fly for a reason, because we are at some point, whether or not we are flying initially, at some point, the fall is pretty much inevitable. And if you understand the perspective at which you're at, if you understand you're at 30,000 feet, you have 30,000 feet to figure out, well, you got 29,999 feet to figure out how to get lift and how to start flying and soaring towards your dreams. So that's what this topic tonight was about, the fall or fly topic. It's really about pursuing your dreams, being willing to make a leap of faith, using the resources that you have at hand, and then being willing to be efficient, build efficiencies in along the way, or build them along the way. That's what this is about. That's what I hope you guys got from these tools tonight. As always, I appreciate you guys rocking with me, whether you're watching live or you're watching via the replay. I appreciate you guys watching, spending time with me on the first row for the Wednesday Word. With that being said, we should have something for keeping it real estate later this week. I'm not sure what day it will be. It'll either be Thursday or Friday. But we should have something on the air for you live then. And then the next time you'll see me live on the first row will be on Wednesday next week. I have one more week with my sons that I'm committed to spending with them. So you will see me Wednesday next week for the Wednesday Word. Topic is always pending at this point, but if there's a topic that you would like us to approach on the Wednesday Word, please feel free to send that to topics@firstrow.com. That's topics@1stwroe. Other than that, again, thank you guys for rocking with me. If you like this video, share it. If you share it, like it. I'm happy to engage with you in the comments. I'm happy to engage with you in the live chat if you're watching via the live. But until the next time, one love, peace, and God bless.